Hello everybody and welcome. This is History Dude, and today we will be continuing our series on the history of battle with the Battle of the Trebia, which occurred in December of 218 BCE. Now, before we get into the Battle of the Trebia, I would like to talk about the Roman legion at this time. Now, in time of war, the Romans often fielded two consular legions as a single 10,000 strong army, with consuls alternating command on a daily basis. Instead of leading the charge from the front when battle was joined, in the manner of Alexander the Great, Roman commanders generally stayed just behind the line, urging troops on and directing reserves to where they were needed. Roman cavalry and light infantry skirmishers had important battlefield roles, but the heart of the army was the heavy infantry. This was organized into maniples of 120 men, in turn subdivided into 60-man centuries under the command of centurions. For battle, the maniples were arranged 3 rows deep in a chessboard formation. Between each maniple was a gap equal to the row behind, or equal to the size of the maniple itself, and the maniple in the row behind covered the space. This manipular formation was far more flexible than the old phalanx and could fight as independent small units or rapidly tighten up in mass formation. Advancing to attack, the legionaries would throw their javelins into the enemy ranks and then close to use their short swords to deadly effect. Now, at the start of the Second Punic War, the Carthaginian general Hannibal, seen here, marched an army from Spain through Gaul and across the Alps into northern Italy. And before I get into that, I'll talk about Hannibal for a bit. Hannibal lived between 247 to 182 BCE, and he was the son of Hannibal Barca, a Carthaginian general in the First Punic War. Hannibal inherited his father's obsession with revenge against Rome and provoked the Second Punic War by besieging Saguntum in eastern Spain in 219 BCE. He showed his military genius time and time again in the campaigns in Italy from 218 BCE onward, but even he could not prevent the final defeat for Carthage at Zama in 202 BCE. He spent his later years in exile, first at the court of the Seleucid king Antiochus III, and finally in Bithynia, where he poisoned himself rather than face Roman captivity. Roman accounts of Hannibal mention his cruelty and greed, but there is much evidence to the contrary, such as the respect he showed for the bodies of his fallen enemies, including Roman generals, and the care he took of his men and his animals. Now, Hannibal led his men across the Alps into northern Italy, seen here, and he lost many of his men and animals, including most of his 37 elephants, traversing alpine passes deep in snow. But his arrival in Italy was a shock to the Romans. Hannibal was victorious in his first encounter with Roman forces near the Ticinus River, right here, near Poppaea. The battle was little more than a cavalry skirmish, but with two significant outcomes. The Roman general Publius Cornelius Scipio, the father of Scipio Africanus, was badly wounded, and Hannibal's successes encouraged more Gallic warriors to join his forces. A few weeks later, the Carthaginians faced a Roman army across the Trebia River. Hannibal sent light horsemen to harass the Romans, provoking them into attacking across the swollen river. Meanwhile, his brother Mago, seen here, to the bottom, led a concealed force of infantry and cavalry to strike the Romans' rear. Most of the Romans fled or were massacred, although the legionary infantry hacked its way through the Carthaginian center and escaped to safety. And here you can see a depiction of the Battle of the Trebia. And you can see how much chaos there must have been. With the Romans being attacked by behind from Mago, that was pretty devastating. Anytime a Roman army, or any army, is attacked from the rear, especially in the ancient times, it's pretty much a death sentence for everybody. So you can imagine the panic of troops fleeing across the river. You can imagine the panic of the legionary infantry who hacked its way through the Carthaginian center and escaped to safety. It was absolute chaos. So depending on where you were in the battle, that depended on what your chances were for survival. But all in all, this was a Carthaginian victory in the Second Punic War. The Romans brought about 40,000 men to the field, to the Carthaginians 30,000, and the Romans lost about 30,000 men to the Carthaginians 5,000. So, as you can see, this is a very lopsided battle. And this is all in part because the Romans were attacked from the rear, and that was a pretty devastating move on Hannibal's part. And that is why the Battle of the Trebia is as important as it is, because it was the first battle in the Second Punic War to really set the Romans in check. And out of, they lost 3/4 of their men. And the Romans were able to field more armies, such as at the Battle of Lake Trasimene. But, this was the first sign that they were facing somebody that was a little bit beyond their skill level. They underestimated Hannibal. When he arrived in Italy from crossing the Alps, they were extremely surprised. And the Battle of the Trebia was the first battle to really set the Romans in check and to make them think twice about the wars to come. And that's about all you need to know about the Battle of the Trebia. As always, this has been History Dude, and remember to have an awesome day.